Testing. Yes, perfect. That does work. Hello, welcome everybody. It's really great to be here. And as Thomas said, I'm from Spotlight, and my colleague Lisa as well will tell you a lot more about that. But as you can see, this panel is all about AI leadership, particularly from a diverse standing. So I would love to introduce all three of my panelists. Do feel free to come up and make yourselves comfortable. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. Fabulous. Oh, well, this is very leisurely, isn't it? This is just a lovely sofa chat between the four of us. So let me introduce you firstly to Lisa. Lisa is CEO at Spotlight. Tell us a little bit about Spotlight. This is why we're here. We've partnered with Domino today. We want to know more.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. So I'm the CEO and founder of Spotlight, which is an events platform committed to amplifying the voices of women in leadership. We have built an amazing community working with just over 95% of the Forbes' Global 2000, and we curate event spaces that really help them to discuss their experiences as women in business and in leadership, share best practices, uncover solutions to challenges, but ultimately to get to the top and stay there so they can really pull out the seat for the next generation of women.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Lisa. And you see all sorts of AI leaders across the board, so we're very excited to hear your perspective. And up next is Sabrina Palme, co-founder and CEO of Palqee. Now tell us a little bit about that, Sabrina. It's great to have you here.
Well, yes, thank you. Great to be here. So my company, Palqee, we are specializing in data governance. And so we are fully operational with a range of products already, primarily focusing on data protection, compliance, and information security. But then in the last year, we've been also working on a new method, particularly focused on monitoring hidden biases or identifying hidden biases in generative AI systems in a post-market environment, as well as testing for reliability to achieve more trustworthy AI.
Amazing. Well, that is why you were on the stage. We want to hear more from you, and I'm very excited to get a lot more insight. So thank you for joining us. And last but not least, of course, we have Roxana, former investment banker, tech investor. Talk us a little bit through your history, Roxana.
Good afternoon, delighted to be here. Thank you so much, Sarah and the team at Domino. So yes, my background is finance, investment banking, worked for a long time in Barclays and Morgan Stanley in the commodities trading sectors, and then just got tired of the big corporates and the institutions, and decided to just invest in tech, particularly with a focus on fintech and prop tech, which is where I had a background and I understood. So I spend a lot of my time, with entrepreneurs, seeing what they are doing, and obviously having a lot of conversations around the diversity of the teams as well.
Amazing. Well, three fantastic women here, and not 10 minutes ago we were just talking about how none of you could do a 9-to-5 job. You are all way beyond that, way too busy. And we're very lucky to have them here, so really appreciate it. So essentially, we need to start off and see where everyone is at, what challenges are actually being faced, particularly as female leaders. Now, we're not up on this stage because we're female. We're up here because we are very highly skilled, these three in particular, not myself, but there you go. Sabrina, I'm going to come to you first. A CEO of Palqee, a data company. You are right in the mix with AI, with ML, all sorts. What has it been like for you?
I mean, it's a challenging journey. I think the startup founder journey is always challenging. And then, of course, there's on top this being a female founder in AI. But I guess I would make a bold statement, an outrageous statement, and would assume that no one here in this room gives a fig about whether they're receiving a great insight, a thought-provoking opinion, a great presentation on your new technological advancement from a man or a woman. No one cares. If it's relevant for you, if it's interesting for you, it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. But I guess what is then the challenge? Why do we face barriers? And I think this is something we all need to be aware about. And with all, I mean us women as well, I don't think we talk about this enough, is that, what's the saying? Birds of a feather flock together. I think we are all subject to affinity bias. And it's just so that we are all used to see men more in leadership position than women. Men are used to see men in leadership positions. Women used to see men in leadership positions. So when there is a woman coming along, the first reaction is like, who are you? What are you doing here? Do you have the right to be in this position? And it's in our nature to do that. And what happens then is that we're setting the bar higher and assessing whether you have the right to be in that position. And I think this is just a barrier that we need to be mindful of, being on both ends, to push through and just say, okay, so what can we do about this? And then, for instance, panels like today are very, very important to shed a light on this, to bring the discussion, to bring awareness. But I think then as a next step, if you have women, for instance, in tech and AI, invite them to talk about tech. Invite them to talk about the solutions they are working on, have them be part of that conversation and in that role model position. And so, for instance, come to me to talk about post-market monitoring of generative AI systems. Come to talk to me about AI standardization, as I'm a technical expert member with the European Standards Organization directly involved in drafting AI standards in compliance with, that help businesses to be compliant with the EU AI Act. And so I think if we are generating that engagement, if we are having more women leaders in these positions, then we will also sort of level things and assess the message delivered and that's what gender you have.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you so much for that. That's amazing. And Roxana, I'm sure that resonates with you as well. Have you been through similar experiences? Are there any particular barriers you've faced?
I completely agree with all the points that Sabrina raised. And I think, let me start by saying that I'm, a complete believer in meritocracy. You are good, you do a great job, and you progress in your career and your life. So it's not about, as Sabrina said, gender, man, woman is meritocratic. But at the same time, also, I think that seeing is believing. You have to see to believe. And sometimes if you don't see yourself reflected, in the people that you want to be, in the leader that you want to be, it's just very difficult to imagine yourself into that position. And the simple fact is that there are very few women in general in data science, in AI, and a lot less in leadership positions. I think the statistic is about 15 to 20% women in data science, and even much less in leadership positions. So I think that the data science sector has an image problem for sure. This is very clear. It has an image problem, and I think that for that, we'll discuss later, I'm sure, what are the reasons and so on. But I think that it would be, we need to dig deeper into, the reasons for that. And I'm sure we're going to talk about, hiring, when it comes to hiring, why not hiring more female? But I think the simple fact is that, there's women are from a young age, maybe from, school level, preschool, high school level, they're just less attracted to this type of careers. And that is the root of the problems that maybe, the society, the companies, the governments, they should try to tackle more a little bit to try to encourage more, girls and the women of tomorrow to get into these fields, so that when it comes to to someone employing, you will have the same number of female CVs and male CVs, and it will be kind of a more fair playing environment.
Definitely, absolutely. And Lisa, I'm sure you've seen very much of the same. And as Roxana mentioned, the hiring and the retaining of great female talent is a struggle. What are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, thank you. A lot kind of leading on from what Roxana said. I'm by no means a data scientist or an AI leader, but I'm in a very privileged and unique position to work really closely with our community of AI leaders and data scientists. And I'm hearing a lot of common themes, and mostly what I'm hearing, the challenge for them is representation or a lack thereof, and also clear paths to career progression and opportunities for them to grow in their career. Women entering AI need and want to see that opportunity for their career to grow, and to see other, diverse spaces with women in AI leadership. So it feels very tangible and very real, and it feels possible in order for them to see themselves in those roles. So as you said, Roxana, seeing is very much believing, in representation representation does matter, and diversity breaks down a lot of these barriers. But again, following on from what you said, I think we need to, as well as supporting women and having programs internally that support women in AI and in the business to help them flourish and thrive, we do need to start with younger women, young girls in school, promoting STEM, for example, women in university, or young women entering the workplace, so that they feel a sense of belonging and they can see themselves in these spaces. And other things I certainly think we need to look at is addressing, or at least tackling, the biases that exist in recruitment, and then going as far as to look at things like the gender pay gap and pay transparencies, all things to create a thriving and welcoming environment for more women ultimately to enter these spaces.
Absolutely, and all three of you have got the responsibility there. Sabrina, let's come to you. I'm sure you agree with Lisa.
Yes, absolutely. I think from my own experience, so this is going to be the theme, birds of a feather flock together, because we are also experiencing this in our hiring approach. Every time, as a startup founder, every time we are hiring, it's actually great to see one of the three reasons when we ask applicants, why are you applying for this role, why Palqee? One of the three reasons is because you have a very diverse founding team. So yes, I'm a female leader, but generally the founding team is very diverse. So my COO, for instance, he's here today as well. He's from Brazil. Our CTO, he's Black, French, American. And that resonates with people. Why am I saying this? Because that then brings back to the importance of leadership, diversity in leadership teams. Diversity in leadership teams attracts diverse talent because it resonates with people. And that way you can also build that culture really around diversity. Now I'm going to say this, unfortunately, is that when we're hiring for a role, specifically for tech roles, I would say perhaps 1 in 20 applicants are female.
Wow.
So even for us, it's quite challenging in that situation. And then, yes, you do need to assess based on skills and talent and for the role you are hiring for. And then so just sort of circling back to what has been said before, we need more talent, we need more women, and we need to start early and make that as an attractive career path for them.
Definitely, definitely. And Roxana, I know that as an investor, from that angle, it's very lucrative to have a diverse team, right? Because you're going to get more investment.
Yes, no, I think that we are moving towards a scenario in which is good that investors kind of have the power to pressure the board, to have a more diverse team. It shouldn't really have to be the case that investors have to exercise that power. But we are increasingly seeing that. But I think, going back to what we were discussing before, I think and I have seen very much what Sabrina was saying. The teams are trying to hire for a technical role, and there are very few female applicants. So that is really telling us that we should try to go to the root of the problem. And one of the great things I have seen, for example, in the UK, there's something called Innovate Finance, that one of the programs that they have done, I'm involved with them, is fintech in schools. Now that can be applied, for AI in schools. So basically going into the schools and educating the next generation of girls, of women, about, what is it like to work in AI? What is it like to work in data science? Because sometimes the perception that they have is very different to the reality. They might perceive that this is a very, boring kind of job with lack of purpose, when in reality it's not like that. So really, the people that are working in those roles today kind of have a responsibility to showcase what is it really like to work in these jobs, and also, frankly, to explain that working in AI, there's so many different jobs that you can do if you work in AI or in data science. You don't need to be a programmer. I'm not a programmer. I have no clue about programming, but there's so many other, jobs that you can do in working for a data science company. Even, you can be in marketing. These companies, they have marketing teams. They have PR teams. I mean, there's so many skills that you can use working within the broader kind of data science and AI. So explaining these things to the talent of tomorrow, and I think this is one responsibility that that companies have, and is a really kind of low-hanging fruit way of cultivating the talents of tomorrow.
Definitely, definitely. And Lisa, you're working with Fortune 500 companies who are having these discussions every day. What are you seeing? Is it the networking and the connecting that is proving to be the most fruitful for getting a lot of female talent out there?
Yeah, absolutely. But just having those opportunities to feel as though they're nurtured in these spaces, and there's positive mentoring taking place, and again comes back to representation.
Definitely. Sabrina, what are you doing with Palqee at the moment? Is there anything in particular that you're proud of that really supports that diverse note?
So, I mean, do you mean from a product perspective
Absolutely,
or from a team perspective? Yeah, so I mean, at Palqee, it's everything we're doing from a data governance perspective, product perspective, as a team, as a business, it's all about sort of building trusted relationships between businesses and stakeholders. This has been sort of the vision from the very beginning at Palqee. And now in the era of AI, achieving AI trustworthiness, that's the big challenge. And I think one of the things, for instance, that we've observed in this domain is there are already plenty of methods and measures that data scientists can implement to reduce the risks of bias, right? And from your data collection through to your training and validation and testing methods, and Domino, for instance, is a great platform to help you streamline that throughout the entire AI life cycle. But what we've realized, speaking with data scientists and engineers, is that usually many of you, I think, working in the space, and they are hyper-aware already about the limitations the AI system has. They know where they're lacking data and where there are representation issues, and they're also aware about the methods that are out there they can use, and then they also, of course, have their opportunities and their own challenges. One of the things we realized is, especially in AI systems where hidden biases and reliabilities are a huge concern due to the market you're operating in, is solving for the unknown. That's incredibly difficult because even in software development, as you're launching a product, there's only so much testing you can do. And even if you're putting it into product, the first customer using the software, they find a bug. Now, in the software world, you can just fix the bug. But in AI, especially when you're talking about hidden biases and you're operating in healthcare and finance and pharma, that bug can have quite a big impact on potentially fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals. And so the method that we've developed was essentially to help solve that in a post-market environment where we can integrate with platforms such as Domino or also other solutions that would allow you to, no matter if it's an ML-based system or a generative AI system, to essentially define anything you want as a subtle attribute and monitor the impact of that subtle attribute on the output of the AI system. So think about things such as, depending on the context and the environment you're operating in, things such as, length of input, complexity of sentence structure, use of language. Women tend to use more soft language. Men tend to, talking in stereotypes, of course, more dominant language. How can that influence the output of an AI system over time, and in different contexts, especially how could that influence things? And so this method we've developed, and we are now working in a range of pilots, validating that solution, which I'm very excited about, because I think it gives data scientists and inference teams that assurance that allows them to monitor potential tendencies of unwanted biases, but also that reliability factor. It allows them to do that and monitor that in a scalable fashion.
Amazing. So I'm assuming that a lot of education is needed for this, because if the humans are finding a lot of unconscious bias, then the AI will as well, right?
Yes, so I think with biases, I think one of the challenges right now we're also facing with AI is that it's primarily taking a computational approach, right? So we are looking at it from a statistical perspective. Excuse me. But the reality is that really, and this is the challenging piece, in a pre-market environment, there is so much testing you can do, but in the real world, it's in a specific context. People use it differently, and you can't test for all of these scenarios. It's impossible. So you also need to account for, you need to take what we call socio-technical approach. So you need to consider systemic and human bias as well, and factor that in your assessment. And so again, I think it's very important to consider that as part of your pipeline, and as you're developing products, to consider, if you're using this AI system in the UK or in Germany, is it going to behave differently? If you're using it in the north of the UK versus south, are there challenges from a geographic perspective, or depending on age? So there's so many variables that you need to assess, and just looking at it from a statistical perspective is not sufficient.
No, absolutely. Roxana, I'd be really interested to hear some of your thoughts from your angle, obviously a little bit different here.
Yes, I mean, I think obviously I can't discuss much on the technical side as Sabrina is working from inside the industry, but I think generally is what we said, is as Sabrina said, the consequences of these bugs or errors can be very dangerous for and have consequences. For example, I can think in terms of fintech, a lot of AI and open banking nowadays is used for lending, and I mentioned this because one of the businesses that I invest is a lending business. So, kind of discrimination in terms of lending depending on your profile and so on, and access to finance, which is a big kind of issue for a big part of the population, access to funding and to finance. So I think these are questions that, have very serious consequences. So is very, very relevant that we are able to discuss about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are three incredible leaders, so there is a responsibility, and you're obviously keeping in tune with everything that's developing and changing. I don't know how you're doing it, but you are. Lisa, how do you see teams and leaders changing as AI evolves, or even just as we all develop in business?
I think the biggest change that's needed, or more attention and focus that needs to be given, is rethinking how we collect the data. It all starts with ensuring we're not building AI with harmful stereotypes. And in order to ensure that, we have to make sure that the people who are responsible for informing AI and building the data are diverse themselves and from wide demographics. If you look historically, data collected around the world has traditionally been done by men. So we have a huge gap in data, the gender data gap, where everything from healthcare to even your iPhone, they were designed and built with men in mind. For example, you'll find much fewer women will buy an iPhone Plus because they were designed for the grip and the strength of a man's hand. Someone that always springs to mind is Sheryl Sandberg at Google. She went in and she said to the one of the Google leaders, "Can we have parking for pregnant women?" And he said, "Oh, I didn't think of that." And of course he didn't think of that. And, he felt really bad. She said he felt really bad that he hadn't thought of that. But it just highlights why we need diverse thinking and why that's so important to make sure that we're not building AI with biases. When Apple first introduced Siri, you could ask Siri for Viagra suppliers and how to find your local Viagra supplier, but you couldn't ask it to find an abortion clinic. And again, I don't think there's anything malicious in how these systems are built. It's just the fact that they're not being built with diverse thinking because they're not, the teams themselves are not diverse enough. And for me, we have a huge responsibility, as you said yourself, Sarah, and it's important we get this right. Personally, I'm very excited about how AI can advance our civilization. But in order to make sure that it's inclusive, we have to first make sure that the teams that are informing the AI are diverse.
Definitely, and that comes down to the data. I wonder how many times you've heard data is king, data is power today. So I'll come to you, Sabrina. What are your thoughts here?
So I was actually in the last few days seeing sort of this notion about sharing your data for Gen AI platforms, right? So there's been this whole discussion about the ChatGPTs out there scraping the internet to train their models and all of this. And then there was this discussion starting, okay, I want to share my data. I want them to scrape my social media videos, contents, etc., so that the data is more diverse and there is more representation. Now there is an issue with this because yes, okay, great, from a data privacy perspective, let's not go down that route. But okay, you're fine to share your data and all of that. But just because there is more diversity in the data set doesn't make it fairer. Because as you add more data, and it can also ingest new biases. So for instance, if you have people from certain demographics, certain socioeconomic backgrounds, living in certain areas, etc., it can just even force even more a certain picture. So simply by saying, okay, I'm adding my data and then it's going to be more diverse and fair, that's not the right message that's being sent to the audience, to the public. I'm always saying, okay, yes, fair, if you're okay to share your data, but with that we don't solve the problem. And I think the big data challenge that we're facing is it's reflecting our biases. We are inherently biased, each and every one of us. And that is the challenge with AI systems. And I think where we need to make a distinction is, to a certain degree, you want to have biases and they are okay. I think where you want to mitigate the risks is unwanted biases and how they can impact individuals and impact the fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals. So yeah, if I would have an ultimate answer on the data collection issue and preparing the data the right way, that would be fantastic. Again, there are methods out there. You can create synthetic data, but that has its challenges, where, you can, again, also introduce new biases. I think it's an iterative process, and as we're getting more data, better data, then hopefully the AI systems that are trained on them will become better as well.
Fantastic. Well, I'll come to you, Roxana, as well for some thoughts.
No, I just wanted to, on the points that were mentioned, that I completely agree with regarding, designing products that are, responding to the needs of the population. I think from the perspective of, seeing so many decks and entrepreneurs and kind of solutions on a daily basis, some of the best, business ideas that I have personally seen is when the founder, the co-founder, the CEO, are responding to problems that they have felt themselves, that they have experienced themselves, and as a result, they are coming up with a solution to address those problems. So this is really key, when you have a diverse team, they are able to, find solutions to problems that they are experiencing on a daily basis. And this is sometimes when you get the best businesses, and even purely from an investor point of view who is looking for a great return, those are some of the best business ideas, because, they felt the problem, they experienced the problem, and they are coming out with a great solution to those problems. So it just, even if you just purely have the commercial, hat on, sometimes those are the best businesses that you see.
Yeah. So what's next? What do you think is going to come in the next 6 months, the next year?
I don't know about the next 6 months. I know more about I feel more about the bigger picture trend over the next few years, and that is certainly that we are moving into a direction of having, more diversity and more initiatives that are addressing the root of the problems. As I said, like I myself am involved in a lot of those school level initiatives, which I really enjoy, and I really encourage a lot more people to do the same type of thing. So and large and small companies, and they are realizing the benefits of tackling those problems at the root. So I think that over the next few years we are going to see a lot more diversity stemming up, from early stage, from kind of more interest into data science, into AI, and so on, which is a great thing. I think also we need to see more regulation on AI, and hopefully we will see the regulation. I think it is a bit difficult with regulation because it has to be, forward-thinking regulation. So a fine balance between regulating the industry, but at the same time not. It's an expression that I heard the other day, which was really a scary expression, but it kind of captures it. Not strangling the baby at birth. So it has to be a regulation that is forward-thinking, but at the same time not too stringent. So hopefully we will see that regulation.
Fantastic. Sabrina, what about you? Any final pearls of wisdom?
Well, I think very much what I said earlier today. It's, every day doing a little bit better than the day before. And I guess the one piece of advice from my side will be, or the one request, again, no matter if you're a male leader, a female leader, or if you're just interested in the industry, is just be cautious about from whom do you receive the message, and are you judging and assessing it against the same criteria if it's coming from a woman versus the male counterpart. If you're just generally more aware about this, I think it will create more opportunities for doing that business, inviting women into the conversation. I think there is still a little bit this idea, okay, of gatekeeping, but that's not my experience at all. Being a woman AI leader in the space, it's not my personal experience, but also because I'm very bullish about it, I'm very pushy. So that maybe plays a part in this. So I think just be aware about this. So depending on where you work and, you know, with your colleagues and having that conversation and just check in with yourself, like, okay, do you subconsciously perhaps judge things differently, depending on from whom you're receiving a message? And I think that already can go a long way.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, Lisa. Last but not least, these AI leaders are fantastic. Where do you see the future as a bystander, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I'll firstly say, I think, you know, as humans, we've hardly cracked the code on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think expecting machines to be informed in the right way and be able to be bias-free is a tall order, and, you know, we're not quite there yet. Definitely AI is getting better every day, but what I'm seeing is more companies, you know, taking on DEI initiatives, which is exciting to see. And I certainly think we're heading to a future, a very nearby future, where we have much more inclusive leadership and many more women in positions of leadership, which is certainly going to help the adoption of the next generation coming into these sorts of roles that we're discussing today.
Absolutely, and as you say, today is really important, and at Spotlight, soon to be Panelle, in our relaunch, we are all about connecting, and we are all about having these discussions, and we have to keep having them. So please feel free to reach out to any of these fabulous ladies today. We are going to be around for the rest of the conference. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of it. It's been such a fantastic day so far, so thank you, Thomas. But please, a round of applause for our lovely ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you.